So today marks yet another day where the crypto market is going down. And if you've been watching my videos over the past few weeks, you'll have noticed that I basically have found out that if you just consistently throughout these weeks, right, every single time you feel some sort of fear, every single time you see the market turn somewhat around, you buy into that. Again, this is not financial advice. This is not me giving you some excitement for the future. It's basically reflection on the past. That it would have gained tremendous yields. It would have done tremendous numbers. And why is that? Well, because logically, we still expect ourselves to be in the bull market, right? It's basically 3 years of up, 1 year of down. We estimate that number to end somewhere between this month and maybe January of next year, but the catalysts usually are quite clear with oversaturation, overexcitement, which, well, the market has been good, sure, but ETH didn't even see an all-time high yet. There really wasn't that much excitement. Matter of fact, I still expect that the whole market will eventually collapse because of some very, very clear excitement within the treasuries, and that basically means that every single company and another right now is getting a boost by saying, hey, you know what, we're going to buy Bitcoin or some other currency. Eventually that will be oversaturated where more companies are going to do it that actually have no real grounds to raise money or whatever, or that are just kind of vaporware and basically are doing this for coins that are smaller and smaller to keep getting this like little multiplier effect by buying that treasury coin. And we're getting there to some extent, but you can see the market right now. Even though 𝗕𝗁𝗲𝗍 just again announced that they're going to be buying billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, or at least are planning to raise for it, the market still is moving down ever so slightly. And it makes me realize if I just shut up, buy into my fear, which again is not financial advice, I'm not making guarantees, I'm just looking back at the past and seeing, hey, if I'd done that every single time, I'd be laughing so freaking hard right now. And again, I've already told you throughout the past few weeks, all I got to do is just keep adding to my longs, just keep upping it. We already got $1.7 million worth of positions open right here. All we got to do is just keep adding. And right now, XRP is slightly too high for me to actually add more. Our latest add here was at around $2.70 something. Of course, I could have bought even more, sure. But since we are facing a short-term downtrend, it is actually not too crazy if you're being a bit more conservative with trying to buy the breakout. In this case here, if you did not catch the dip, perhaps another entry point could be the moment we cross the resistance. Where do I see opportunities right now though? Where do I see us making a good amount of gains here in the near future? Well, all my theories are basically based on Bitcoin and the fact that Bitcoin slowly but surely is still rising up. And even if you look at it from any angle whatsoever, actually, it's still practically going exponential throughout the past couple of weeks. Yes, the last 2 weeks specifically, or 1.5 thus far, have been going down. If you extrapolate this and look at it from a bigger picture, you don't really notice this downtrend we see in the short term. But also, if you look at any of these past runs, it's quite normal to have some sort of down weeks. Even here, right at the beginning of 2021, you can see we had multiple weeks where the price went down like 30 or more percent. Before continuing higher throughout the next few. Just because we have 1, 2, even 3 weeks of down doesn't mean that we won't see a very, very beautiful future. Because again, these lines right here, they project every single time that Bitcoin broke the local high and where it gave a rally afterwards. So again, if you look at whatever high, right, just look at any of those numbers. The first time it broke it, it almost instantly went for another couple of weeks of crazy gains. And that's on the short term, long term, whatever. Just keep looking back at it, right? A new high was made after an impulse. Okay, bam, high is made. The moment it broke through was right there. Bam, look at how crazy it went. And you can keep kind of pulling these. You can keep pulling these. I think it will not work for maybe 1 out of every 10 here, but for most of them, it works beautifully. But if you're wondering what type of coins are we looking at right now, for the most part, I'm still staying with the majors. And that basically means I'm staying with coins that are at the top, that for the most part, the coins that I always have in my bots, right, that I keep showcasing. And by the way, if you also want to trade crypto, I've got some links down below. So the bot trading I always do on this website, linked right there. And if you just want to trade normal crypto trading, I always do it on Blowfin. It's the platform right here. That's what the black one is, as you can see. As for the bots, I won't go too deep into it today because I'm not really doing anything. The coins have not gone down far enough where I'm going to add more buys. And basically, they're buying and selling on their own regardless. So all I got to do is just wait it out here and wait for them to just grid out more profits. And again, if you look at the numbers, it's pretty insane. Just Solana, for example, 8% over the past 15 days. You can scroll through, right? Some of these have added on, so it lowers the percentage a little bit. CRV, we're down as we bought at 98 cents. Right now it's 89. But you can still see, right? We've made 23.6% in the past 20 days off of volatility alone. Pretty crazy. Or Pengu here, just take a look. We've already made 27%. And that's why I love this so much, because the more volatility we have, the more we cash out in grid profits. So why am I not going for smaller coins? I do buy smaller coins basically every single day. I mean, recently, for example, there was an entire wave with all these, how do you call them, like index following coins. This is like 𝗵𝗲𝗏, a very famous crypto Twitter guy. He was pushing that a lot, made tens of millions of dollars with it by publicly buying a few percent. But they all of a sudden went absolutely crazy. And as there's basically such huge amounts of hype for these type of coins, if you take a look at it from a monthly perspective, for example, you can see the peaks that I made. I've also been buying different sort of coins in that like field. For example, this NASDAQ 666, the world's first tokenized pop empire. Yep, sometimes you got to believe in a narrative, right? Where again, these guys kind of claim to be the new S&P 500, sort of in a crypto manner. There's a few other coins that mimic it, but again, I'm just naming one example here of different coins that I would buy and my philosophy behind why I sometimes buy them. Again, this is not financial advice to you. This is just what I sometimes do, and I wanted to take you in on a little journey there. Anyway, to get back to it, like a small cap meme coin on BNB in this case. And the reason I get into different projects like this is mostly because you do not know if all of a sudden these guys, for example, are trying to get themselves viral over in China, but you do not know if either of them is all of a sudden going to really pull it off. Maybe they get some sort of crazy support wave, and here you can see these guys are probably pretty good with the marketing. If you just relatively look at some of the ones that were successful at 1.5 billion, I don't need it to get to 1.5 billion. Right now it's at like 9 mil. Right, so if I buy a few of these coins, if just one of them pops off and does a few numbers, for example, I get some at 3 mil, some at 7 mil, 10 mil, whatever, I buy a bunch, like 5, for example, and just one of them pops off and goes to a few 100 million, all that matters is who's backing it, where do you see it, how is their social media efforts, because the narrative is good, right? If they have a sort of, the best way to describe it, I believe, would be if they're pushing for this, we're a movement, we're really gonna, and they have a couple of spearheads, like these SPX has Murad. Yeah, sometimes these plays can just be really, really powerful. And in this case here, it's kind of funny, the whole narrative and the fact that they're, from my own angle, trying to just really popularize this idol and then also make the coin do well. And like I said, once the market, by the way, my MNT is also doing tremendously good. I'm just noticing that now. If you guys don't know, I've been talking a lot about it over on Twitter, as is one of my favorite coins. Not necessarily for price movement, but just I've done really well on MNT. So it's always my favorite a little bit. Regardless, Pump Fund is doing well again because they announced a lot of buybacks and more programs. Actually, they purchased, I believe, at least one more company. And I was going to say, what I also am going to do a lot more over the next few days or weeks, not yet the favorite moment, but hey, is actually get into the top losers. So right now, Bank is actually losing because they're losing the race versus Pump Fund with their Bank launch. So I'm skipping that. But basically, most of these coins in crazy good markets, if I enter these with size, and that basically means that I enter them with the idea to make a quick flip over the next day or 2 days, it tends to end up working quite nicely. Why? Because the overall market is upward. So if I'm buying the worst losers, sometimes they lose 2 days in a row, sure, but they tend to not do that. And there's actually two different ways. One is to just really try and buy a coin that's gone down significantly, because what are the probabilities that it's just going to keep losing so much more than relatively the market does? Again, if there's some announcement specifically, like for Bank, not the best idea, but for some others, it very often works out. But the second is what I used to do always, which is you buy in very, very small with the idea to quickly flip it for 1, 2, 3% profit. But in case the market does move down significantly further, we actually add a simple DCA. And I had a good bot for that too in the past. And the reason this works in good markets and definitely is not something I like to do in bad markets is also why I simply open up all these bots, by the way, because they basically do the same but then simpler, is because again, the market tends to bounce back really quickly and really hard. If you had done the same for XRP, right? Let's say it was down 15% throughout the day, and you actually decided to buy in, seeing that it was down 15%. So you have to wait basically until you see that it's really dipped down low, right? And you start buying it, for example, at 10%. You bought another time because it was now 15%. Well, you wanted to buy again if it was 20, didn't get there. Now, because your average is minus 12%, in this case here, the next day, it was plus, I think 10%, something like that. So you were able to take a very, very good bounce back upwards. Now, where would you do this? In which coins and which ones you wouldn't? I always stick to like the main coins, because if I look back at my mistakes, the main mistakes I made was buying into coins that were too small, because you can make easier gains that way. But that also means that you're going to have to DCA significantly more frequently if all of a sudden the market does move down for a few days in a row, because you don't want to be stuck with, in my case here, like half my portfolio, for example, in one coin, because you have to keep buying, keep buying, keep buying. It's preferable, if that were to happen, that it's a coin you really don't mind to hold for a long time, which is why I don't do it out of any coin, out of like the top 100. But even then, a lot of coins I wouldn't even touch. It's just some food for thought. I'm just giving some thoughts out there. Still, I'm going into all this with the basis that almost any single one of the coins in this top list right now that we're looking at is still going to 10x from these levels. I've added before 1,000 times, matter of fact, that market cap really doesn't mean that much. Specifically when it comes to caps or maximums, it really doesn't make that much sense, because we're naming something, market cap, right? We're seeing it in dollar terms, which on their own, really, what does that mean? Because we don't care about the dollars, we care about the coins in that sense. So it's an antiquated way to view it, I'd say. But a secondary part there is, how can you really properly cap a currency? Theoretically, these things can infinitely gain. And I know some will argue and say, no, because there's not enough money in the system. But this is money. So if you want to measure it with dollars, I don't even know how that exactly would work, when essentially the people that are, for example, buying Bitcoin, they basically state that that is the better form. So then theoretically speaking, the other thing should be measured in BTC. But by that logic, why would there be a max? I mean, you can definitely gauge when a number is quite high or difficult to get to, but why would there be a max when a currency also doesn't necessarily have a max? You shouldn't forget, we're essentially only talking about the valuation of what this whole currency is worth in theory, right? Again, the moment, theoretically speaking, that somebody starts selling heavily, this valuation, the market cap here, could drop by, for example, 80% within one person selling. It could, theoretically. It's just like how you can, for example, have one coin that gets to 50 trillion market cap right now because only one person bought it for $1 and he bought 50 trillion coins, right? So now the market cap is 50 trillion. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. And it just, I really sometimes like to point it out just for the sake of saying, hey, if you think, oh, a multiplier of 5 is only possible because that way it'd be half a Bitcoin and that's why, I think that makes sense. But if you're saying it, well, because $400 billion is way too much, because 400 billion is actually, part of GDP, all that I think is just blabbering, talking for the sake of talking. Measuring it to the biggest asset, measuring it to perhaps, the US dollar or the S&P for right now, I think can also be done. But over longer terms, I don't think it makes too much sense. And again, to get back to it, all I'm doing here is just looking at my top coins, XRP, ETH, Solana. Actually, not that much Solana, mostly actually top of the top coins. And I just keep adding. And I keep telling myself, if I keep doing this, every single time thus far it's worked out. I know it's scary, but in a few weeks I'll love myself. And that's all I keep on doing, time and time again. And that's what I'm up to right now. And you know what? My camera, again, overheated. So I'm going to say that's about it. If you want to trade, as you know, links are down below. Nothing here is financial advice. No guarantees are made for no financial gain, whatever. And I'll see you guys again in another crypto video somewhere later today.